read a lot in December. The Christmas break will do that for ya. And I read an eclectic mix of books, as is evidenced by this, the first video in my December wrap-up series, which has the YA books, the classics, the sci-fi, and fantasy I read in December. Unravel Me by Tahara Mafi, the second book in the YA dystopian Shatter Me series. I like the first book, especially the writing during the time she's in the asylum is transcendent. I am absolutely in love with the novella that comes between these two books, which is about Warner. And this book I actually liked better than book one, but less than the novella, so I guess I'd say I really liked it. I liked the internal psychological struggle she deals with. I liked the psychology of Warner and his dad and all that. Parts of the love triangle were a bit eye-rolly, but overall I'm really liking this series. The Spirit Thief by Rachel Aaron, the first book in the fantasy The Legend of Eli Monpress series. Under the name Rachel Bach, this author wrote my favorite space opera series called Paradox, so I was excited to read her fantasy, but I didn't like it. I liked the world building. I thought the magic system she devised was pretty cool, but the character development wasn't her best, and the writing didn't keep the story too engaging. It doesn't really make me want to continue on with this series. Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is science fiction and was my book club book for the month for the Hollywood Booklets. I think this was released in September, somewhere around there. It has had some buzz around it recently. I think it was nominated for the Goodreads Awards for 2014. So here's the summary. One night, a famous actor past his prime by the name of Arthur Leander has a heart attack and dies on stage. That night, the world, for all intents and purposes, ends as a deadly form of flu kills off most of the world's population. Most of the story takes place 15 to 20 years later as the world gets back on its feet, and it tells the stories of Arthur's friends and acquaintances who survived. I liked the writing style, and I think she created a good post-apocalyptic world, and I liked how she kept tying it into the world as it was before because it reminded you constantly of the devastation of the loss that had happened. But I thought the plot was weak, and the ending was especially anticlimactic. She bets it all on a surprise plot twist at the end, but I'd seen it coming from like page 20, and there are some books where guessing where the plot is going doesn't really derail the epicness of the story, but in this case she's like, ta-da! Takes a dramatic pause for you to go, wow! And then brushes her hands off like, my work here is done, and the story just kind of peters out. I'd read more by her though, as she's got seriously great potential. She just needs some story help. Murder in Mesopotamia by Agatha Christie. This was a Hercule Poirot mystery. I'm a big Agatha Christie fan, but I think I finally found a book of hers I don't really care for. It wasn't horrible, it was just lackluster. I was fine with the narrator being the nurse. That was actually pretty good, but the story itself dragged and was just a little bit like a weird dream for me. Other sci-fi book I read in December is Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card. This is a companion novel to Ender's Game. My husband read it last month and has been begging me to read it so we could talk about it, so I did, and I love this book. I loved Ender's Game for the perfectly written, tight story, but I love this one for the character study of Bean. I identified with Bean a lot, not just because he's short. I highly recommend reading Ender's Game and then following up with Ender's Shadow because they do complement each other a lot. Alright, that's it for now. What authors have you read recently where the story was almost there? You could see how it could have been great, but it just didn't quite make it.